Hello everyone and welcome to the Streaming Theatre, where we curate, live edit and live stream play readings, theatrical works, gigs and other creative projects. My name is Kemp, I'm the Artistic Director of the Streaming Theatre, and on today's show we have David Ihrig, who is an acting educator who has developed a new technique by talking to neuroscientists. I'm very excited about this. So we're going to be going head to head against each other. We're going to be comparing the techniques, mine being a sort of classical Stanislavskian approach and his being his new neuro-brain-based approach. Very exciting. It's going to be a battle like you've never seen before. Oh yes. We would really like you guys in the live chat, because if you've got some questions that you'd like to ask us and things like that, I think that would be really exciting just to get you involved and chatting with us. So jump in the live chat. I can see a couple of people already. Hi Jessica, hi Phil, nice to see you, hello. So yeah, if you've got any questions during, then whack them in there and we'll try and get to them. If you can't see the live chat, you might be watching on my website, thestreamingtheatre.com. So just click the button below me that says watch live on Twitch, and then you can come and join us and get involved in the live chat. That'd be awesome. As always, if you can support the stream, that'd be incredible. Any donations help me keep streaming and help me bringing more arts events online. Just think of them as tips on a night out or something like that. You can see the donation button below me, or if you can't see it, go to thestreamingtheatre.com and all the donation links are on there. You can also follow me on social media. That'd be awesome. Social media links are here just below me. Find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all that stuff, and we upload all our content to YouTube as well, so check us out there. That'd be cool. But I think we should bring David on so you can meet him. He's super lovely. Where is he? Here he is. David Ihrig, how are you?
I'm excellent. I'm lovely.
Yes, you are lovely. Cool. So we met, gosh, when was it? So we met like in person, well, you know, on the internet, sort of, and had a chat a couple of weeks ago, was it now?
Yeah. I guess it was. Time flies, but yeah, it was probably 3-4 weeks ago, maybe.
And I saw you posting about your technique on the various actor forums and things like that, and was just super interested. So we got in contact, then had a bit of a chat, and then this idea of just streaming it out so people could get to know about it kind of came to both of us, and seemed like a good thing to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a very scintillating conversation comparing the two perspectives and approaches. And yes, I think it should be shared.
Me too. Okay, cool. So why don't you give us a little intro about yourself, like how this came about and things like that, and then we'll talk about what we're going to actually do today.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, my name is Dave Ihrig, and I'm known in some circles as the science of acting guy. And I got to be known by that because in 2017, I had the opportunity to design and teach a class for the Claire Trevor School of the Arts called the Science of Acting class. And it was a collaboration with the Center for the Neurobiology of Learning and Memory at UCI. And a lot of exciting things came out of the relationships that were forged during that class. And so a lot of interdisciplinary events, research projects, the first neuroscientifically designed one-act play, and the actor's algorithm, which is 7 steps to embody behavior, to embody character, which we're going to talk about today.
Awesome. So your technique is lifted from actual like neuroscience stuff, and you've developed that into a technique for actors to prepare a role. Is that fair?
100% correct. And what I like to start out with when I talk about the brain-based perspective on acting is the premise under which it was created. Because, you know, brain science sounds complicated, and it is, but brain-based perspective on acting is very simple. The perspective is just this. It's, look, if our goal as actors is to create realistic behavior on the screen and the stage, then can we benefit by understanding the mechanisms that naturally guide, determine, and predict human behavior? And
I think that's super awesome. And I mean, I've been speaking to my wife's sister, who's a therapist, and I often talk to her about the roles that I create to try and get that like actual like evidence-based theory behind the things we do. So, and Andrea, if you're watching, hi Andrea, thank you for all your advice. I think it's something that I'm super interested in anyway. So when I heard about your technique, that you'd taken that to the next step. I thought it was super cool. So
well, thank you. Yeah. It's been super fun and super fruitful. Yeah, I mean, in the class, I had world-renowned researchers, brain scientists come into my acting class of 12 students and myself, and talk about things like emotion and memory and language, and cognitive linguistics. And there's so much to learn. But one of the really again, to go back to how simple a brain-based perspective on acting is, the one really overriding model that sort of set the stage, if you will, for this new technique is this very simple model that says that that behavior, right, which is the actor's currency, right? That's what we do. We produce behavior. So behavior is the result of responding to a stimulus based on your past experiences with that stimulus.
Sure.
It's a nice, simple model. And, if you look at, if you were explaining that, if two of us were to come upon a dog on a leash that was barking ferociously or just being, and one of us had been bit by a dog as a youngster, and the other one had been raised in a home full of dogs, we would have two totally different physiological responses to coming across that dog.
Absolutely.
Different behaviors. And so it's a really simple way to say past experience is the most significant determinant of human behavior. And so it is for us, and it also is for our characters.
That's super cool. So I think we should probably sort of clarify like what we're doing today. We sort of build this as a battle between a classically, traditionally trained actor and this new technique. But to be fair, the more I've got to know David, the more I like him. So I don't know how battle-y this is going to be, but I think we'll stick with that sort of that presentation, because I think it will give a good way of showing like what my training is and how it is quite traditional, and then how that compares with what you do. And I think that's a good structure to follow.
I think it's wonderful. And for actors watching along, I think what it does is it gives you a chance to hear two different perspectives that you can then bounce off of whatever your perspective is. So whatever you do to create a role, I think will, inevitably you'll be doing it in your head unconsciously probably, but you'll be comparing these two different perspectives. And I think we may all wake up tomorrow morning better actors.
I love it. And so before we dive into that, Phil's just asked, thank you, Phil, for asking questions. You're always good. Phil's just said, is this meant to work alongside past techniques or replace techniques? How do you view this?
Yeah, so it's, everybody creates their own technique. This is a standalone technique. So it was designed literally to be 7 steps to embody your character. So it's, every step is in a certain order, and every step is a function. And at the end of the 7 steps, you have a character. So, that's a good question. I mean, certainly could you, you're going to do with it what you will, right?
Sure.
So I'm going to teach you 7 steps that work. And then if you figure out how to enhance it for yourself personally, by all means, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, cool. We've got Alana in the chat room as well. Hi, Alana. Are you going to be the amazing mod magician that you usually are? Because that's incredible. You don't have to. You can just sit and enjoy if you want to. Okay, cool. So I think it's worth setting out some rules so we all know what we're talking about. I think the first thing that is useful to say is that what we're talking about is an acting technique for like what might be described as naturalism, right? Like when you get a script and it's meant to represent normal humans, and in a naturalistic, but a naturalistic way. I mean, there are beautiful theatre traditions all across the globe that all have their own techniques, their own histories, and I don't know a lot about many of them. So I think it's worth kind of setting out at the top that what we're talking about is a naturalistic script like you might see in like a Hollywood film, most theatre, and most theatre sort of in the US or the UK or things like that. Is that fair? Do you think that's a fair thing to say?
Yeah. It's not unfair.
Cool. All right. And I've definitely done abstract shows where I've used my own technique. So I think it does translate, but I think it's worth kind of setting that up.
For sure. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm going to talk about in particular is really about having the experience of the character.
Yeah.
So yes, that is primarily naturalism or realism
Cool.
that I'm focused on.
Nice. And David's kind of said where he has come from and where his technique has developed from, and maybe I should do the same so people know sort of my background. So you guys know me as the streaming theatre chap, but before COVID hit and before the streaming theatre existed, and what I still love to do is acting and directing, and I'm an acting educator as well. So I've been an actor for 16 years. I was trained in classical Shakespearean, which I love. I was also trained in traditional Stanislavskian technique, and I was also trained in Meisner. So my technique is a hybrid between classical Shakespeare, Stanislavski, and Meisner. So that's where I'm sort of coming from. So maybe the first, and you know, it might be live chat time as well. Maybe we could say to people, like, what do they think acting is?
Okay.
And while they're writing that, we can give our definitions of acting. And we can also ask the live chat, what do you think the challenges of acting are? And we'll try and bring your answers in as David and I are talking as well. So David, what do you think acting is?
Okay, so I keep it simple. I think acting is regulating behavior.
Cool. All right. Yeah, I like that.
Acting as a verb, from defining the verb of acting,
Yeah.
it is to regulate behavior.
Yeah, that's super simple. I like that. I probably go off Stanislavski's definition, which is acting is living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. I probably wiggle that a little bit to say acting is behaving truthfully in imaginary circumstances, because I think if you're living truthfully, you might be delusional. So I'm going to say behaving is better than living.
I think Meisner would agree with you. I've seen it. I've seen the definition as behaving truthfully in imaginary circumstances.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to go with that.
Go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to say, you know, I spent a lot of time early on thinking about how to talk about acting, how to teach acting without metaphors being the primary tool of instruction. Metaphors are great to help you understand as a secondary, but you need to be able to talk, I believe, about something you're teaching in a tangible way. And so, while I love the idea of living truthfully in imaginary circumstances, that resonates with me. I understand what it is, and I think it's great for non-actors. But I think we could do better. And
okay.
My arrogance.
Let's do it.
But it's been something I've worked on. Could we create a working definition for actors? And to me, that means if I tell you, if I define shot put for you by saying it's a heavy ball and you throw it as far as you can, and I give you shot put, you can do it.
Yep.
If I tell you acting is living truthfully in imaginary circumstances and I hand you a script, I don't know that you have enough information to successfully create.
I would agree with that. Yeah, absolutely.
So I was thinking, okay, what is the working definition? So I'm going to there's the first time I'm presenting this on the streaming theater live. Woo. This is the 21st century paradigm for brain-based actors.
Okay.
And it goes, acting is responding to stimulus from within an imagined reality through the perspective of a character.
Sure. I'll buy that.
And the reason I like those is you've actually got 3 defined actions with predetermined outcomes. So if I tell you, and we can play with this right now. So if I say responding to stimulus, how do you solve that problem?
Yeah. Well, you figure out what your stimulus are, and then
Boom.
You figure out how you would respond to those stimulus.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And if I tell you, and then now this one's, I say from within an imagined reality. And I purposely phrase it that way. And I probably have to hint at this because I believe you can't respond from within the imagined reality if you haven't constructed it first. Yeah. Right. So that's why from within an imagined reality, first you have to imagine reality, then you can respond to the stimulus that you've already constructed.
Yeah.
And then lastly, from the unique perspective of the character. So how do you solve that problem? Right.
Yeah, because I think there's definitely actors who choose to act from their own perspective, right? They argue that there is no character, there is only the self, right. and that you respond as yourself in the imaginary circumstance. And they say that the characteristics of the character. That's horrible, Kev. Sorry, I'll try. But
No,
that are intrinsic to the imaginary circumstance. But I think I prefer yours. It makes it clearer because it makes it say, right, well, we need to figure out who this character is. But yeah, we've got a couple of things from the live chat. We've got Alana said, a challenge of acting.
Oh, good.
Noticing key differences between yourself and the character. That's kind of what we were talking about just then. Nice, Alana.
Yeah, right on it.
And being able to speak the other character's language. That's really, and I think that's what we were just discussing is, Alana has said, that the character is sometimes different to yourself, and how do you figure that out? Thanks, Alana. That's cool.
Well, and in fact, Kevin, later on, we're going to go into it in greater detail, but that is a major part of the first step of brain-based analysis.
Nice. Okay, cool. So I think we've got, as you said, I think we now have a working definition of acting, which I think is good.
And if I may, so my goal strictly, all the questions I ask of the scientists as we're going forward is how can we efficiently and effectively embody these behaviors of another character, right? So I want to be clear about that because it is the definitive outcome is to embody the behaviors, and I could say unique perspectives and behaviors of each character.
And I also want to jump back to something you said as well, that you're passionate about being able to discuss it in a practical way. And I think that's something that you and I share. We're both very passionate about that is sometimes you work with acting teachers and they're like, you just got to feel it. And it's like, well, that's fine if you feel it, but if you don't, what do? You have to have a systematic approach. And I think that's something that we both share. So I think that's worth saying as well. Cool. What's a challenge for you in acting, David? What do you think is a...
I think the biggest challenge is at the end of the day, I really believe that almost every other aspect of acting can be accomplished entirely realistically. The one thing that we can't do because it's not natural is we have to speak the words that are predetermined, the words that are written for us ahead of time. Right. So it's one thing you get, unless you're improvising. Yeah. If you're improvising, you can be totally realistic when you're performing. There's almost no difference between acting and everyday behavior. Yeah. But the real challenge of the actor is how do you embody the drives and motivations that spur a particular line of dialogue.
I really like that because, when I work with students, I often find that when we're improvising, their ability to invest in the imagined reality is much easier in improvisation. And the moment you give a text, it's harder. So I think that is worth saying, that the pre-written words are a barrier and are a challenge that we need to figure out. So that's cool. That's cool.
It is cool. And if I may, there are some really interesting solutions if you talk to a cognitive linguist.
Nice. Yeah. That's cool. Okay, cool. So just to let everyone know at home, David and I did set up a timer for like each segment, and I'm aware that we're already hitting the end of our first segment, so I might power through just the last things we wanted to touch on, and then we can get to the next bit. So I'd also like to say a challenge that I find about acting is it's not real. So how do we invest in a reality that isn't real and try and behave normally? And I suppose that's similar to the pre-written words, but I do think that it's like, if you're meant to be emotionally involved in something and it's not real, how do you get emotionally involved? So that's a challenge I find. And this is a big one for me, is the health of actors during and after a role. So how do you go home to your family and have a dinner and you're not like bringing back a character? I would say that that's a challenge for actors as well.
And that challenge I find to be very personal. So I've never had that issue. I don't know why, but I haven't really, we could talk about that more later, but in Canada, they're doing a study right now. They've gotten grants because they think that actors have what they're calling emotional hangovers as they're calling it a workplace hazard. Yeah. And I know, I've heard of, I don't know anybody. I guess that's why it's really not as important, I guess. But I don't know anybody who's been through it. But if somebody has, obviously I feel empathy for them. And so, but there are things we can do. But you're right that
Yeah.
I'm sure it is a challenge for someone.
Yeah, I've definitely been in casts with people that have struggled with, as you said, like an emotional hangover, or I often call it like emotional leaking, where it comes into your normal life. So it is something that it's yeah, I've experienced people having issues with it, and when I first started out, I had it too, and I don't think I get it too much anymore, but yeah, when I first started, I got it. Cool. So we'll power through a bit more. I just want to say that before this, David and I split acting into 3 parts. First part being discovering the role, which is like research and rehearsal. Then you've got performing the role, whether that be in film or theatre or whatever. And then we've got after the job, releasing the work. So what we thought we'd do is we thought we'd give ourselves 10 minutes each to try and power through our techniques. And bear in mind that if you ever worked with David or I as acting instructors, obviously it would take longer than 10 minutes. But for the sake of this, we thought we'd just like try to challenge ourselves, just go like, we got 10 minutes. Can you summarize your entire technique in 10 minutes? Yeah. So we thought I'd go first because I represent this like traditional system, and then David would go to compare it against mine. And then after we've both done that, we'll open it up to a live Q&A to everybody in the live chat. So you can ask anything about either of our techniques, and we'll try and compare the two and see what happens. Does that sound good to you, David?
I'm in.
All right, cool. So I'm going to go first. I got 10 minutes. I'm going to set a little timer going. Here we go. Kev's acting technique in 10 minutes. I'm just going to see if any... yeah, okay. Live chat. All right, here we go. 10 minutes. Ready? Go. So step 1 of Kevin's acting technique is reading the text. I think it's really important to make this quite a sacred thing, because it's the only time that you as the actor are going to experience the text in the same way that an audience member will. So rather than reading on the bus on the way home or on the train, like sit back at home, dim the lights a bit, get a glass of wine, and just enjoy that text. And like you're viewing a production, because it's the only time you're going to see that production as a whole, rather than from just your character's perspective. After you've done that, I analyze the text with 20 questions, and I'm going to bring those up for you now. So the first questions are an objective analysis. These are the things that are written in the text, and anything of your character that you make, you have to make sure that they honor this stuff, because this is the stuff that's built into the text, and you don't want to contradict that. So you go through the text and you find all the things that you say about yourself. So the character might say, like, I'm scared of dogs, to pick up on David's example from earlier. And so you just write that down so that you have a clear list of everything that you say about yourself. Then you go through the text and you say, what do others say about me? What do other characters say? Oh, I don't like Kevin, he's weird, he's scared of dogs. And then you go through the text again and you say, what does the writer say about me? And this is often in plays, in the italics, kind of before a scene, or in a film script, in the kind of postscript before we head into dialogue. So it might say, Kevin enters, he is a 39-year-old man, and he is wearing a tie, even though I'm not, but in this play I am. So you'd write that down. Then you go through the script. What physical actions are described by the text? So something again in italics that might say, like, Kevin is playing tennis or something like that. And the last question is, what do I do? And this is often difficult to separate from number 4, but rather than those physical descriptions, it's things like, I walk into the room and I'm talking to David for 5 minutes. So that may not be written in the italics, but it is what you're doing in that scene. And that could be like slightly subjective, but you're trying to nail it down to what you're doing in each moment. Hope that makes sense. Cool. So after you've done that, we move into our subjective analysis. This is things that the writer hasn't given you, but the stuff you need to start fleshing out to make your character sort of interesting. So number 6 is, what do I want in each moment of each scene? And as I said, this is something you need to come up with for yourself. This is often called the action, the objective, or the intention. And so, yeah, you're going to go through and you're going to be like, I'm talking to David for 5 minutes, but what am I doing? I'm trying to get £20 out of David because he owes me £20 and he hasn't given it to me yet, because he probably doesn't have pounds in currency. but that's what I'm doing. Number 7, how do I know when I've achieved it? I think this is really important because you need to know, you need that objective and intention to be something you can achieve. It can't be something wishy-washy. Usually I want to get that in a sentence, something really clear, like, just get that money. And I know when I've achieved it because he's given me the money. Oh, I'm on 6:30. I need to speed up, I think. Number 8, what am I prepared to do to get it? This is what makes you different often from a character. My tactics to get £20 out of David might be just to ask him, and if he says no, I'm probably not going to do anything else. But maybe if I'm a slightly more aggressive character, I might threaten David or beat him up to get that £20, and that's going to really start differentiating between you and that character. Number 9, how long do you have to achieve this goal? In traditional Stanislavskian technique, this was called tempo rhythms. I just find that name confusing, so I just call it how long do I have? And that's going to change your tactics, right? If you have 20 seconds to get that £20 and it's a life and death situation, I might come straight into that scene and threaten David. I don't know why I'm attacking you so much, David. I don't mean to. But if we've got half an hour, I might try and persuade David. So it's going to change my behavior depending on those tempo rhythms. 10, what's in my way? What are the obstacles? Maybe David doesn't have £20 or he's skint and he doesn't want to give me £20 or whatever. So those, I need to be aware of those obstacles to come up with tactics to get around them. 11, what will happen if I don't get it? I think this is important as well. If nothing's going to happen, if I don't get my £20, my tactics might be like, just ask. But if I'm literally going to die, if I don't get that £20, then my tactics are going to massively expand. I will threaten David to get that £20 if I'm going to die because I'm fighting for my life here. So really worth knowing. Then we're going to move into a slightly different area of how do I view society and everyone around me? And this I call your relationships. That's really important. If I don't know David, I'm going to have massively different tactics to if he's like my brother. So that's worth knowing. This is something that's not in Stanislavskian technique, but I think it's quite important. It's how do I want them to view me, which I've called projections. And I think we all do that. I think we might be shy inside, but we might want to come across as an extrovert. So that's going to change how we do stuff, even if we don't feel like it inside. So I think your projections are worth knowing. 14, what's happened in my past? This is going to massively affect lots of things, a bit like what David was saying earlier. If you're scared of dogs because you've been bitten by a dog, your reaction to a dog is going to be very different. So I think that what happened in your past is really worth knowing. 15, what happened just before the play? I think this is good to know for how you enter a scene. Like if it's winter outside and you come in going, all comfortable, it's going to feel weird to the audience. If they've seen that it's snowing and you come in a bit chilly, then like you're just going to be in that reality a bit more. So it's worth knowing what's happened before the play. Moving on to the last 5 questions. 16, what is happening in my moments off stage or off film? I think this is really important because you need to know your arc all the way through that narrative, because if you don't have a solid arc, this is, I think, super important in film, because on stage you're often living in a chronological order, so you kind of feel it throughout the night. But on film, if you're shooting, scene 4 on a Tuesday and then you're going back to shoot scene 2 the day after, you have to know that arc, otherwise it's going to feel really disjointed. So knowing what's happening to you when you're not in a scene and mapping that out, super important. 17, if I could have anything in the world, what would it be? In traditional Stanislavskian technique, it's called your super objective. It is almost like your fairy tale ending, and it's worth knowing as like having as a driving force to run you through the show. I've only got 2.5 minutes. I really need to speed up. 18, this is just stuff to flavor your character. What's my greatest fear? What makes me happy? What makes me unhappy? I just think they're cool things to know because it might affect the way you react to certain things in the play. Whew, okay, 2.5 minutes. Once you've done all that, you just got to test it and you've got to learn it in rehearsal. So in rehearsal, try out your subjective analysis. Try your actions and tactics and intentions. And if they don't work, throw them away, change it, and try something else. You've got to find something that like gets you going and gets you invested in the scene. So keep trying, keep doing things. You got to learn your lines like it's nothing to think about them. They should be instinctive and in your subconscious. And I use images to do that. So I really attach strong images to everything I say. If I'm remembering something in the scene, I will have pure image mapping all the way through that to get me through it. If I'm describing something, I want to have images for that. It's only through living those images vividly and specifically do we start to tell the truth as actors. So, and also it just helps you remember lines. So I always think that's good. 1.5 minutes. I'm sweating now, David. Okay. In performance, I think you should rehearse like you perform and perform like you rehearse. And what I mean by that is when you're rehearsing, you should invest in it 100% so that you know if your intentions are working. If you're only giving 50% at it, you're not going to know if that's going to pay off on performance night. So you've got to like go at it in rehearsal. And then in performance, you should keep playing. You should keep messing around and discovering in the moment, because that's what makes it fresh. That's really important. You should also have an inner monologue all the time. And that inner monologue can be, if you're speaking, it's just that. If you're listening, it's what your scene partner's saying. And if none of those things are happening, you should be thinking continuously and hearing those thoughts in your head. And this is where I become very Meisner-esque. Meisner was all about investing in your imagined reality in order to kind of distract yourself from the parrots that go, you can't act, you can act, you just got to keep going. So in that, you should respond immediately, listen to what they're saying, and just think all the time. And if you're not, then you're doing it wrong. You've got to move, move, move. 30 seconds to run a conclusion. Here we go. To create a role, you need to know your given circumstances inside out, which is often the play or the script. That is your world. You need to do a subtextual analysis, which is your history and your time in the play, so that you know what's going on. You need to create images and an inner monologue so that they're your thoughts, and that is the truth of your role. It is what's happening inside of you. And you need to have your actions, your tactics, and your projections, which are the expressions of those truths. And you need to learn them inside out like a martial artist who, like, when somebody throws a punch, he just defends, doesn't even think about it. I'm out of time. So you just need to know it really well. That's the end.
Nice.
Hey.
I think that's well done.
Cool. So that is my traditional technique. Do you think that that's... is that similar to what you've come across, David, as a sort of traditional Stanislavskian technique? Or do you think there's any changes there?
Well, I think, no, there are a couple of changes from what I know, but I mean, I don't profess to be a Stanislavskian expert. I was super impressed when we first talked about your depth of knowledge with the work and the technique. So I'm learning from you as we talk about that. But I will say there are a couple of things that were really noteworthy, that you're so image heavy in the work. That's interesting. And you mentioned that it's the easier way to memorize the lines, and you're 100% correct about that. We can talk about that maybe later in the Q&A, because there's a lot to say about that.
Yeah.
The way we memorize our lines is really important, it turns out. So I think that's very cool. Nice. And there's other things I think we could actually comment on afterwards too. I think. Yeah. I think once I do mine, I think we can compare sort of the similarities.
I think that would be really good. It would be good to say, like, okay, what are we doing that's the same?
Right.
But then what are those differences? Because I know that you're not particularly like objective or intention based. So I'd love to talk to you about that. So I think that's cool. Yeah. All right, cool. So if anybody in the live chat resonates with any of that traditional Stanislavskian training, let us know. If you think it's different, let me know. But now David is going to go into his 10 minutes of his technique. Are you ready, David Ihrig?
Yeah, I'm going to set my own timer because I can't see the timer. So.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay, so yes, I am ready.
All right. Here we go. 10-minute countdown starting now.
Okay, so first thing I have to do is just lay a little bit of groundwork before I get into the actual 7 steps. And that is to say that we basically look at acting in 2 skill sets, if you will. One is focus or attention. So the behavior is a result of what you're focusing on in any given moment, right? And then the second one is the past experience, which we already talked about when we talked about past experience defining your behavior. So a lot of the technique, the actor's algorithm, is based on identifying the relevant information to your character in a given moment, and then identifying the relevant past experience that drives the character's response or behavior in that moment. Nice. So how do we do that? How do we embody this character? Well, the very first thing we do, Alana, is we start out by identifying the differences between ourselves and our character. Now, I want to mention this too, because One really interesting, one benefit, one side benefit I hadn't counted on is when you start understanding sort of the mechanisms of the brain and brain functions, you learn some things that you can learn. You can actually optimize the way you use your brain to achieve specific tasks as actors. Mm-hmm. So the 7 steps have sort of these ideas built into them that actually makes the technique more effective and more efficient, which is kind of cool. And one of them is this: you only get to read the script once, the first time once, right? And so there's this idea that our brain is very turned on by novelty. So the very first thing we do in the brain-based script analysis is we circle the ideas of the words that have different meanings for the character than they have for us. And there's a nice little worksheet, and you circle those in the script and you write them in the worksheet. And the reason you do that, well, let me tell you what you do now. And the next thing you do is then you use a reframing method to adopt the new meaning for yourself as the character. And this is, to me, the most granular component of a individual's behavior is the words that they choose and the meanings that those words have for them. Mm-hmm. Those become the building blocks that we use later on when we start creating memories for the characters and some other things. But it's a really important step. So I love that Alana pointed that out first. What is the different meaning for the character than myself? So we do that. Then we adopt those meanings for ourselves using a reframing method. The next thing we do is when we get into the memory design, and we create the character's driving memory. Now, the driving memory is the character's perspective. And the way that we identify that is every story has a theme, right? Every story is written about a set of ideas. So Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is about lies and deceit. And if you were to play Brick, you would believe that lies and deceit are disgusting. If you were to play Maggie, you would believe that lies and deceit are okay if you're going to spare someone feelings. White lies are perfectly okay. It's preferable. So those two different perspectives about the theme of that particular story is what drives all the conflict between those characters. If you look at the scene, and it jumps to the surface if you've adopted the driving belief first. So the very first thing we do is we say, what is my character's belief in relation to the theme? And then what happened in that character's past in order for him or her to adopt that belief. And then we don't have time to do this today, but then we use an actual technique designed in collaboration with the neuroscientists to best encode that information as a memory, and we rehearse it so that we can retrieve it if we like, or we can allow it to be just unconsciously effective as well. But what's important about doing that at step 2 is it defines your perspective as you're looking through the discovery process. You'll be amazed at what you find when you create that first driving belief, when you create that first memory that determines your driving belief. I've had people do that in 2 minutes, say, I'm more connected to this character than I've ever been to any other character, even after playing them. Wow. So it's really, for some people, it's a very transformative technique and pretty exciting. Amazing. Okay, so that's where we start. Now, the next step is we design memories for events in the script. And this is actually a late addition to the technique. And I did this recently and fairly recently in the last year. And I learned things about roles that I never noticed before by just taking the time to identify what the author said happened in the past and then embodying that, designing the memory for that so that I can live those past events. It is incredible how much you learn, and the author tells you so much through this process. So that's the second
5 minutes, David, just to let you know.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Then the next thing we do is a step called we design memories for the primary elements of drama. Now, what we've done so far is set the mindset for the actor, for the actor to know the character as you're beginning your discovery process. This next step is the first time we look at scenes. Okay, and what we do is we identify the environment, the relationship, and the mood at the top of the scene. Those are the 3 things that you need to tell a story. If I tell you that you're going to play a scene and I don't tell you whether the other character is your mother or your lover, it's going to be a weird scene and nobody's going to really know what it means, right? You can't ask your brain to realistically immerse itself if you haven't given it the relevant information. And those 3 things are very general, simple steps in that direction. So we design memories for each one of those things: the environment, what's happened in that place in the past where the scene is taking place that might affect your behavior. What happened right before the scene? Well, what happened to put you in the mood that you're in at the beginning of the scene? It might have been right before the scene, but it might have been a year ago because it's the last time you saw the character, right? So what happened to put you in the mood? And then the last one is relationship. And I find this one to be also very transformative. We go bowling with one friend and we knit with another, right? We have very different interactions with our friends. And so we have different relationships with them, literally, because so creating the memories that you have with that character is another really strong technique to create nuance in your performance, because you can't help but treat the people differently. Okay. We're coming up to steps 5 and 6. Now, step 5 is called mapping the environment. And then step 6 is called directed focus. Okay, so the two foundations of this brain-based perspective are memory design and directed focus. And directed focus is directing your attention to the relevant stimulus that is causing your character to respond. And so we break our script into beats at this time, right? Now, keep in mind, this is step 6. So all that other work happened before we ever look at dialogue. This is the first time we're looking at dialogue. So step 6, we break our scene into beats, and it's very similar to traditional approach. It's when does we say, when does your behavior shift? Yeah. Right. That's when the new beat is. It's pretty similar, but we're looking now to identify beats in units of attention. So the language of the imagination is sensory information, right? We don't really talk to ourselves very much. We do a little bit. There's something that's called an internal dialogue, but auditory digital means self-talk, which is internal dialogue. So that can be a thing, but mostly it's sensory. So much like Kevin was talking about, we identify what is the stimulus that causes you to either speak that line or take that action or shift that behavior, whatever that is. And then we're to our last step of the thing is then to self-assess your preparation. So it is to run the entire performance at your rehearsals, and with the specific intention of looking for bodily sensation each moment, because I believe that you can always notice a sensation at any given moment. And in fact, it's a part of a way we encode memories kinesthetically, is to say, where do you feel that? Point to where you feel that. And actors always go, oh, I feel it right here, or I feel it right here. And there's total scientific validity to having sensations in the body as a result of noticing something, whether it's real or imagined, right? So that's how we test our choices and decisions. And we go through and we run it, and we consciously are noticing sensations in our body. And if there's something not there, then we have to go back and we look at either fixing the stimulus or we fix the past experience. Cool. Fix the memory that is causing that behavior. So there you go. I did it in 9 minutes.
You really did. You beat me. That's incredible. So everybody in the live chat, if you've got questions, start churning them now so that we can filter them in. I'd say we've got about 20 minutes left in the stream to really start churning your questions. So get them in. Yeah. Also, I'm going to turn a fan on because I don't know if you can tell, but I am melting in my room. I don't know if that's the pressure from David's incredible technique or what, but something's happening. So excuse me, just want to turn it on.
Actually, I'll pick up here because something I didn't get to mention. I said earlier that, understanding how we use our brains allows us to optimize certain things. And I didn't really give examples of those earlier, and I didn't either. So some of the things are, for example, when you're in certain states, and we can call them emotional states for now, but certain states of being, you have the ability to recognize, to cancel out the ability to recognize certain stimulus. Right? That's what's one of the scientists tells is so knowing that when you're looking for one specific kind of information during the discovery process, you can assume one state. And then when you're looking for another, so if you're looking for just to recognize ideas, you can look at things in a dissociative state, right? Which is something that we do. And then we use our imaginations in an associative state, which is different. And that's the thing. So the very first time you do directed focus, one of the things that we say is put yourself in the emotional state of the character as you're choosing the stimulus, because
that's
that will
interesting.
automatically direct you to choose the stimulus that is important to the character.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's
Okay,
one
so
of them.
let me see if I can like summarize a little bit from your talk to see if I've understood it correctly, and then we can kind of maybe filter some of these questions. So my understanding is that basically you're focusing on creating memories that the character had, which will inform the behavior within the scene off of stimulus that you pick within that scene. Is that like a fair kind of...
That's very good.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. Cool. And I really like that, because I think I do that too. As you said, like I create images of my past. I definitely do that, and I definitely look for stimulus within scene. But I guess the big difference is that I look for those stimulus, and then they inform me of my intentions or my objectives to then achieve, rather than essentially allowing a memory to do the work. That feels like a difference in our techniques. Do you think that's fair too?
I do, and I've had this discussion because many people get very offended that I don't use objectives.
you are rocking the boat, I must say.
Yeah, I know. So I apologize if I. But my answer is kind of twofold. One is that it's just because of the premise, and there is no section of the brain devoted to objectives, right? If you ask a neuroscientist, this is what we do. We choose objectives and we choose actions. And in fact, I did ask Dr. James McGaugh, who's the 5th most influential living neuroscientist, and he said, and he was originally an actor, by the way, which is kind of
cool. Yeah,
he's great. But he actually said, yeah, no, I get it. It animates behavior, but it's an artificial construct. It's not how we actually live our lives. It's not it's not an actual depiction of how we experience life. And so this is why I just don't use it. Now, so do you want to comment on that? And
I do. Okay. Because I think there are definitely moments when we do have objectives that we like. For example, like if somebody is mugging you, your objective is to like get away, right? And you, or not, or what's happening? No.
So I would say that's a fair description of what's happening.
Yeah.
But that's not what's happening at the neurological level.
Because
right?
What we're saying is that person isn't going, I think I'm going to get away. They're just going, bah, and they're just running or something.
That's right. Yeah.
That's super interesting. I want to come back to that, but I do want to jump in the live chat because I want to get into that, David. All right, let's jump in the live chat. Phil has said, is this process of designing memories purely mental, or do you act out past memories with a scene partner? I think that's really interesting. Can you comment on that?
That's a wonderful idea. So this method is evolving, and when we talk about acting out things, I think of Stanislavski's active analysis, right? That's where he ended up at the end of his career. So it becomes very interesting. I'm sorry, was it Phil?
Phil, yeah.
Yeah. So Phil, I think it's a great idea. So to answer your question though, it's mental process, right? It's a mental process, and it's taken into account all the things that your brain needs to encode information, to store it as a memory, and then bring it back later. And we take into account all kinds of things like consolidation process. You need 6 hours for a memory to consolidate. So we do different types of rehearsals to encode the memory, and we use very specific system to encode the memories. So and we actually just did a fun little test where we measured the 3 different types of rehearsals, which are journaling it, speaking it to another person, and just imagining it. And we actually had actors wear neural sensors from a company called Immersion, and it captures neurological attention coupled with emotional resonance. So anyway, I went off a little bit, but all 3 of those methods were effective in encoding memories and for the characters to bring them back and be immersed in the memory when they brought it back. Having said that, I think it would be awesome to create the memory. And so here's the deal. When you're acting it out, you're creating a memory of the thing that's happening, right? And I think that's going to be more deeply encoded because you're enacting it.
Right.
So it almost, I'm playing with the idea that what you would almost do is create the memories that would lead to the time that this thing happened, that would affect your characters, right? Behaviors in the scene.
Yeah.
And then enact it. But if you just enact it without providing the character the memories that motivate the behavior during the act of analysis, during the improv or the acting of the scene, I think it's still good, but I think it could be really good if you created memories that supported it and then enacted it.
So sort of to jump back, you have a systematic approach for installing memories into people's heads, basically.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
I want to play with that.
Yeah. No,
I feel like we need another stream here, right? We need a stream where you like mess with my head and we see what happens. No, I think that would be super fascinating to like see how that happens. And obviously, like, you know, obviously if you message David, you could probably get a little class with him and find out how it happens.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I got to start sharing this with people soon. I've now done 2 pilot classes, and they've both been very successful. And they're both very well documented. And I haven't really offered this to the public yet. And it really is time to. So agreed. So
I want to jump on a couple more questions. How do you come up with the past memories to build your character? That's a cool question. Thanks, Patty. So this is probably what you were talking about in some of the earlier steps. Like how, and correct me if I'm wrong, Patty, but I think the question is kind of like how do you identify the memories to build? Is that right, Patty? Let me know if I've got it wrong, but yeah. How do you come up with the past memories to build your character?
Yeah. So there are steps. Every step has, but for instance, I'll go back to the driving belief because we had already talked about that. So in that particular case, you ask yourself, what happened in my character's past to cause him to believe that lies are disgusting? And
cool.
And I want to nail home again, bring back the idea about, because you've identified different meanings for the character and you've adopted in the first step. Remember the first step, so now when you're building those characters, you're incorporating those. So, let's say you're playing a doctor and there's a stethoscope in the scene, right? You know what a stethoscope is, but but it has a different meaning to a doctor than it does to you. So you probably, I would circle that if I was creating that scene, and then I would do research about the stethoscope, and then I would reframe it. So what context would the stethoscope have to have this meaning for me? And then I would adopt that meaning. And then when I'm building my memory for the doctor, if it's a play about a doctor who's disgusted with lies, it's kind of interesting because the stethoscope makes its way because your brain is very good at creating context and compartmentalizing. So you can really think about each one of these characters that you build as having its own schema, if you will. Right. So, and I hope that's a good word. I mean, it's a good word, but I hope it's a word people know. But it's a word like, if I say airport schema, you'd go, oh, luggage, suitcase, people saying goodbye, right? I don't have to say the place where we go to drop off people and the planes fly away. I just say airport, and all those things.
Yeah, it's almost like when you say airport, you get like a spider web erupt in your mind of all the things that are attached to that. Yeah, that's right. And so if you start building your character's spider web points, then when you build your memories, and this happens automatically, it's really very exciting. The brain it's amazing. The creative abilities we have are just so incredible. I think that's super cool because it reminds me, I did a play called Dry Powder a few years ago, and it was a play about the sort of finance world in New York, and so much of the language was all of that like finance language, which like I'd never heard these words before. Right. Even like Dry Powder, the name of the play is referencing to like capital that you have in your bank to buy stuff with. And so it was like the first like week of rehearsal was going through the script, finding the words that don't mean anything to us and attaching the meaning that these characters would have to those words. So that's kind of what you're talking about, right? It's like finding the things that define a character by what they are and figuring out how they react to those things. Is that fair to say as well, do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the reason that's the first step is because those details will find their way into the memories that you end up creating. But I mean, the short answer to your question is just, what happened to my character in order for him to hold this belief.
Yeah. All right, cool. So we're kind of at 8. I kind of just want to hit like a few more things. Are you cool to chill out for like 15 more minutes, David? Is that
Yeah, I'm
cool?
good.
Okay. All right, we're going to go for 15 more minutes to try and hit some more of these questions, and also for me to attack David on intentions a little bit more. Cool. So this is quite cool. Phil said, "How do you ensure a variety of action without taking tactics into account?" And I'd like to talk about this because I think it's cool. When I work with, thank you, Phil. When I work with actors starting out, when I'm kind of coaching them, often you find that they might fully emotionally invest in a moment, and they fully believe it's real, and well, not real because otherwise, as I said, they've become delusional. But yeah, they're fully invested in the imagined reality, and they could be like fully emotionally invested, like crying and everything, and like they're totally into it. But sometimes it's still boring because there's not enough shape, right? So we can use, to pick up on what you said earlier, we can use an artificial construct to shape that performance to make it more interesting. Because, in the late 1800s, there was the movement of naturalism in theatre, and it only lasted like 10 years because everyone was super bored, because it was like an hour and a half of somebody just like sitting reading a book, and everyone was just like, no. So then like Chekhov started creating these natural characters in heightened situations because it was more interesting to watch. And I feel like that sometimes that's what we do as actors. We kind of curate human behavior in order to make it interesting. It's still natural, it's just the more interesting bit. So first of all, is there an option to do that with your technique, or / do you need it with your technique?
Yeah, so I would say that we don't need it.
Cool.
I would say because Phil asks really good questions.
Yeah, I like Phil.
Yeah, it's good. Phil's great. So I would say we don't need it, just based on my experience of working with actors. Now,
cool.
We always do monologues, right? So that's where you're going to see something where you need to make choices or it gets boring, right? But we are making choices.
Mm-hmm.
It's just we're making choices the same way we make choices in our everyday lives.
Mm-hmm.
So there are significant shifts in behavior, and I'll say this. We did an experiment where we compared directed focus, where you're identifying sensory information that prompts the response, versus picking tasks and actions.
Okay.
And we watched this. One of my students did it for a final project, and she did it with her husband. He's never learned the technique before. She taught him this new. She ran him through the memory. She taught him a directed focus, and we watched. And everybody sort of agreed that there's an interesting thing. It's if when you play an action, like when you pick a line to play an action, you play. At times, actors tend to play the action all the way through a long line.
Sure.
And so that actually adds to it. It doesn't look artificial. It doesn't look real. Whereas when we were using the sensory stimulus, we counted. You could see more micro expressions. You could see more like twitches in the face and like just little things. But when you're playing an action, you're like I'm gonna challenge you, right?
Mm-hmm.
As where if I'm seeing something in you that I really want to challenge, different stuff happens. So to me, I believe the sensory stimulus, because it's more organic, it's more what we do naturally, you get a lot more variance in the behavior.
So you're saying that it is a natural byproduct of the technique that there is more variance in action in the behavior of that person because they're reacting more to stuff that's happening to them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really, really cool.
I need to actually go ahead and quantify that. I need to do a study where I actually count micro expressions, and have actors do it one way and actors do it another way. And then, you know,
Yeah, and I just want to. David kind of touched on this earlier, but it's something that we chatted a lot about pre-stream, which was that you talked about the fact that you get actors to wear devices that measure stuff that's physiologically that's happening to them, so that you can be like, what's happening in your brain as you're acting, which is super cool. And so you've said, like, when you've used your technique, you've seen those spikes in their physiological responses, which is
watching it in real time.
I mean, I just think that's cool. Like, is there ever an opportunity that we could like try and get that on a stream somehow? Like, because that would be super interesting.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we've been talking about, I don't know if I want to go here early, but we are talking about producing a new series, and I know that I could get the creator to come on with me, and maybe we could get a couple of actors, right? We'll send them the sensors, and then we'll try the different methods. And I mean, one of the things I'm working on right now is called the actor's imagination, but it basically is using the sensors to identify individual strengths in actors, because we all use our brains a little bit differently.
Right, absolutely.
Right. So it's I've done this with a couple of individuals, and I did it with the last pilot class. We did it with all 18 students, and they get a report like, okay, here's where I'm really strong in my imagination. Okay, well, let's utilize that when we're doing this part of the process.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes.
So we're gonna tell you a little bit more at the end of the stream about what we've got planned for you guys to kind of get involved. So we'll do that at the end. So I'm torn right now because I want to get to questions in the stream, but I want to ask my question. I'll go with you in the stream because you are the most important thing, everybody here. So let me just see. Let me see. Let me just read this out loud because I can't. Wooj Park says, I believe David's focus is more on each individual reacting to various stimuli. If we start from recognizing our own stimuli and creating memories of our character, each individual can find different yet unique responses and objectives. Yeah, I think that's fair. It's like so I think what Wooj Park is saying is like your own personality is going to be built into that because you're going to analyze a text in your own way, right? You're going to see those stimuli.
Well, if that's what you're saying, that's why the first step is so important, right? So we don't want you to see the stimulus the same way that you see the stimulus. We want you to view and then embody the way the character sees the stimulus.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then Patty came back and said, I love the idea of creating past memories to build the character. Has your approach allowed actors to embody the character quicker than with traditional training?
Yes, like with ridiculous.
That's a strong answer, people.
No, it is. I mean, literally, when people do it, I've got comments like, one workshop in, and somebody said that the way he felt about the scene that we worked on in this workshop, so 10 minutes of him, as an individual, he said, this is how I usually feel when I'm going into tech run. Right. Wow. Like, so I truly believe that it is a very effective and very efficient method. Cool. It really is. And people constantly say like, oh, I know this character more deeply than I've ever known any other character just from this one memory. So it does. It really enables many of the people that I've worked with to very deeply immerse themselves in characters.
Cool. And then Jessica, is it Jessica? Or is it, I know your name is Jessica, but is it Jessica? I know Jessica. Is it Jessica from Night of the Living Dead? If it is, say hi. She says, would you say that this technique encourages actors to act on impulse than rather pre-planned tactics?
Well, that's a great question. So just like every other technique, right? Everything that we're doing, all the work is in the discovery process. And then when we get to performance, we let it go.
Yeah.
So, but I would say impulse. Yeah, I've got to sort of wrap my mind around that.
Yeah.
I mean, if I were to answer that from the sort of through the lens of what we talked about earlier, where the behavior is more fluent because, you're responding to a particular piece of stimulus. That is impulsive because things, they're changing. So I would say it's impulsive.
Cool. All right. So I think we just, somebody said, I'd love to see this technique at work. I would as well. Me 3. Jessica says hi, so I think it is Jessica. Hi, yes. So that's cool. So people are excited. If you want to get in contact with David, you could do so. Boom, with his email, which I've just thrown up on the on the live stream. It's the ihrigapproach@gmail.com. You can send him an email and see what he's about. And as we said, we've got a few streams in mind. So if you would like to see more streams from us both, then let us know on social media and all that stuff. So I feel like I really want to ask, because as you know, I'm an intention objective chap, and I think what I find so exciting about objectives and intentions is that sometimes when I see actors delving into their mind too much, they are disconnected to their scene partner, and especially with things like often a person may call back to their own experience in order to help a character in scene with something. For example, they might say, you know what, there was a time when I was with my mom and she was crying and I was doing this, but they're actually telling that person to help them through something they're going through. And I'm not saying that anybody using your technique would do this. I'm just sort of setting a scenario up that when I've seen people invest too much in the memory, they sort of do that thing where they look off out of the window and they kind of sink into this thing, when actually that dialogue is about talking to that person and helping that scene partner do something. And I think that's one of the reasons I like intentions so much, is they keep you grounded in the reality of the now of the scene. Do you think that's fair? Is there something else that you use to make sure that a character stays present with their scene partner? Is it just not a problem?
Yeah, I mean, well, so first of all, let me be clear, because you bring up a good point I was not clear about. I'm not suggesting that a character recalls the memory in that instance.
Oh, okay, cool.
Right?
Yeah.
The memories are there, for instance, for different reasons, but the driving belief, right? That memory is there so that you can anchor and really embody the character's perspective. You don't have to think about that. You're not thinking about the time that happened. It just guides your choices and behaviors throughout the discovery process, right? In this particular moment, if there was, for instance, in this particular moment, and you're talking to the person, and the moment is really about this other person, having a memory of the time that person helped you would be a great thing to have put in and then left alone.
Oh, so you're saying that the sort of memory you might build in this scene is not necessarily the memory of your mum crying, but actually a memory of the person you're talking to, like some kind of memory with them.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. No, I mean, so somebody asked me once, can you use your own memories? And I said, no, because your character doesn't have your memories, but your character. So the reason this technique works efficiently is because we're identifying the relevant information that affects the behavior in the scene. Yeah. If it's not in the scene, we don't care about it. We're not creating backstory about anything that is not 100% relevant to the behaviors that occur in that scene. So in that scene, when you're talking to that person, remember, every scene has the environment, relationship, and mood memories. So probably the relationship memory might be the one that's the most motivating in wanting to help that person.
So just like any technique, it isn't just knowing how it's done. It is figuring out how it works that's the important bit. Because I can say to actors, like, make sure you choose an objective, and then so many actors I find choose wishy-washy objectives and it doesn't work. And when I work with them, it's about helping them recognize intentions that they can actually achieve. So what we're saying is that somebody might choose a memory, and actually what they need to do is find the right memory to inspire them in that moment. And that's where working with you comes from, right? It's like, I don't want to get too salesy on this. I don't want to be like, everybody should work with David, but maybe we should all work with David.
can't even do that right now. I mean, no. I mean, yeah. So I lost my train of thought.
I got a bit babbly. Right.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I had something I wanted to comment on. Oh, so the objective. So one thing I want to say about the objective, okay, is in a lot of traditional acting, and I think we talked about this before. A lot of teachers will say, okay, go learn these things about your character, but that's not enough.
No.
Right. So just saying pick an objective is not enough.
No, indeed.
We have to figure out how that character can fully immerse themselves in that objective.
Indeed.
And here's the sort of irony of this discussion is if you do have an objective, it is directly the result of a past experience.
Indeed. And that's where I absolutely agree with you.
You can't want a Ferrari if you've never seen a Ferrari.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe that is a good sort of end of the stream, because I feel like that is it, right? Is that like I know how to find intentions and objectives, but sometimes it is creating those memories and creating the history that motivates and drives me for those objectives. That's the hard bit. And maybe that's something that you might have cracked. So
and maybe once you create those memories, you find you don't even need objectives anymore.
Maybe that could be the mind-blowing thing. Oh my goodness. So what we're thinking, David and I, we got Pilar and Patty going, more streams. So this is what we're thinking, everybody. Is we're thinking that we try and do a few streams maybe where David brings along some neuroscientists and we're actually like
call it. You got to pitch the title.
Okay, go on. Pitch it.
Actors ask a neuroscientist.
Huh?
Honestly though, it's good. And from my past experience, I've done this with my classes, and I love to do it with professional actors. It's expanding. It's mind expanding. And every time I do it, I learn every time.
So the idea was, we would have. Go on, you go. I got excited. Go on, you say it.
Okay, so that's the idea. We'd like to do a series, Actors Ask a Neuroscientist, and there's a couple of recent studies that have come out that are very relevant to, I think, actors should know about these ideas and some of the recent studies and discoveries that have come out. And so the idea is, let's invite these researchers on to talk about their research, and then we can ask them directly about the mechanisms that affect our ability to embody behavior.
Yeah, and just like you lot have done today in the live chat, you can ask them in real time what they think about stuff. So that could be cool. We also talked about we could get together a group of actors to try some of this stuff out with. So if you're interested in having a go, either contact me at the Streaming Theatre. The website is up there. There's a contact sheet on the website, or on any of my social medias. Reach out to me there and let me know you're interested. You can reach David. I'll throw his email up again. There it is. You can reach David at the ihrigapproach@gmail.com, and we'll start like a Facebook group or something that people can join.
I think we take a limited number of people who are really interested in the subject, if they exist, and then we use them to sort of develop pre-production ideas for what we want to talk to the neuroscientists about.
Yeah. So if you're interested in getting involved in that, as I said, Phil's just said, is your work available online anywhere for us to look through before future streams? Is there anything that people could go to online?
You can go to my website. Yeah. Okay.
I don't have that. What's your website?
It's theihrigapproach.com. We'll get you there. Cool. So will the actorsimagination.com. Either one of those.
So yeah, contact either me or David if you want to be involved in that. Yeah, we're thinking like a relatively small group of actors, right? Like something just to start us off with. So if you're interested, reach out to us and we'll get you involved. We'll look at some future streams, asking neuroscientists stuff. If we can, doing that live monitoring of actors. That sounds super cool. But I just want to thank you so much for coming on, David. As I said, I really enjoyed getting to know you over the last couple of weeks as we were prepping for this stream. I think this is like super fascinating, so I'm super down to chat about it more.
I love
So
it.
thank you so much for coming on, mate.
Thank you. I really enjoyed talking about it. So thanks for the opportunity to.
Great. So yeah, everybody come and find us on social media, get involved with the Ihrig approach, super exciting. And definitely come out and check us on October 29th, where we'll be doing a live edited, live performed and live streamed version of Night of the Living Dead. It is called Night of the Living Dead, The Rising, and it is an adaptation of the original script from 1968. We've got some of the cast in the live chat today. They're super awesome. So October 29th, come and check it out. We'll be back soon with some other streams as well. Go on the website, go on social media, see what we're up to, and we will see you very, very soon. Thanks again, David. So lovely having you here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.